Hello, everybody. David Shuster here. Polling analysts across the U.S. political spectrum say they've never seen numbers as lopsided as this. The Democratic advantage over the Republicans in the midterms is now up to double digits, and Donald Trump's approval rating is hitting record lows. The main factor, according to the data, is the affordability crisis, specifically gas prices.
The average price for a gallon of gas has stayed above $4.50 for the past week. And when asked how they felt about the Trump administration's approach to the economy, 11% say they're enthusiastic, 19% satisfied, 38% frustrated, and 32% angry.
That is a 30-70 split, 30% positive, 70% negative. And it closely matches a recent New York Times poll on Donald Trump's handling of the economy. 64% disapprove. And the last line of the poll said this.
In the polling era, there are no examples of the president's party retaining the White House when the president's approval rating is under 40%. Again, Trump's is at 37. And then it said, quote, more often, the election is a rout.
Now, in a midterm election, the most important polling number is usually the generic ballot question. Voters are asked which party they generally prefer in a congressional race. Political analyst John Heilman on MS Now called those numbers stunning.
Democrats have an 11-point lead in the congressional ballot, the generic congressional ballot in that New York Times poll, but a 14-point lead with likely voters. The 11-point lead with registered voters, the 14-point lead with likely voters. And in a midterm election, that likely voter number matters even more. We know that midterm elections often, there's a lot of it's about enthusiasm. These are people who say they're absolutely for certain going to run. We've seen that advantage for Democrats all along. But if you put a 14-point congressional ballot lead together with the president's numbers, 43 points underwater with independent voters, I'm not predicting anything because I don't make predictions anymore. But that is the kind of thing that you see when a wave is building and when a wave is coming.
The last big wave, or tsunami, in a midterm election came in 2018. 2 years into Donald Trump's first term, Democrats took back control of the U.S. House and got a net gain of 40 seats. In the week before Election Day, a polling average found that Democrats had an advantage on the generic congressional ballot question of 4 points. 4 points in 2018, 11 points now. The biggest midterm wave in the past 50 years came in 1974. At the height of Richard Nixon's Watergate, Democrats picked up 49 House seats. With Donald Trump, there are other numbers in the New York Times survey that are causing Republican heartburn. Among Hispanic American voters, only 20% approve of Donald Trump, 71% disapprove. In order for the Republican redistricting efforts in Texas and Florida to translate into additional GOP House seats, Republicans are counting on Trump and the GOP pulling in about 45% of Latino voters, or similar to the last presidential election. But the numbers have crashed for Trump and the GOP among Latino voters, as well as among younger voters. And then there is the data involving independents. Among independent voters, Donald Trump's approval rating stands at just 26%. Disapprove is 69%. And independents make up about 40% of the entire voting electorate. Again, John Heilman on MS Now.
The key number to look at is this number with independents. That's how you can tell whether a wave has a chance of coming. Nothing's certain in this world, Joe. But when this New York Times Siena poll came out on Monday, a lot of people looked at that top line number with Donald Trump his approval rating at an all-time low at 37%. That Hispanic number sure stuck out to me. The number with young voters, Trump 59 points underwater, 59 points compared to that 51. But the independent number, Donald Trump underwater with independents by 43 points.
And by most accounts, the numbers are not going to improve for Donald Trump anytime soon. And that's because in response to the Trump war, Iran continues to block the Strait of Hormuz, blocking 20% of the world's energy supply. And so gasoline prices keep rising, forcing many Americans to drive less or use public transportation.
Instead of getting a rental car and driving to D.C., I decided to take the train.
It was a lot easier to take the train and save a few bucks.
Gas prices are up more than 50% since the war with Iran began, as driving Americans out of their cars and on to public transit.
I filled my tank up last week. It was $55 to fill it up. That's the first time I've ever spent that much on my vehicle.
The average price for a gallon of gasoline in the United States is now $4.50. Before the war began, the average was $3 a gallon. It is having a direct impact on public views about the overall economy, and the economy is the #1 voter concern. A CBS News poll asked voters what words they would use to describe the U.S. economy.
65% said uncertain. 63% said struggling, while only 12% described the economy as rebounding or stable.
Uncertain and struggling is how many Republican lawmakers now describe GOP efforts to keep control of Congress. And never mind the Democratic tsunami that appears to be building in the U.S. House, a blue wave is also forming now in the U.S. Senate. Nearly every Republican path for keeping the Senate majority counts on holding the Texas Senate seat. But Donald Trump just weighed in on the GOP Senate primary runoff between incumbent John Cornyn and Attorney General Ken Paxton.
Breaking news, Tim, for you. Donald J. Trump on Truth Social, and it's pretty long, has posted that he is endorsing in the Texas Senate runoff Ken Paxton. No huge surprise. The incumbent, John Cornyn, said just yesterday that, that ship has sailed. He was not expecting the endorsement.
Wow. But it's one thing for Trump to stay out. It's another for Trump to give a boost to Paxton, the attorney general who divorced after an alleged affair and was impeached over campaign violations, carries enormous baggage. Polls show that if Paxton beats Cornyn in the GOP primary, the chances soar for Democrat James Tallarico to win the general election in the fall.
One thing is clear today. We're about to take back Texas.
Republican Senate Leader John Thune.
None of us control what the president does. He made his decision about that. That doesn't change the way I feel. I am certainly supportive of, will continue to be supportive of Senator Cornyn and his reelection.
How much harder has he made it to keep the majority? How much harder has the president's decision here made it for you? The #1 job to keep the Republican majority, given your concerns about Ken Paxton's viability as a candidate.
We look at lots of races around the country, and the majority runs through a lot of different states. We have 24 seats up this time. The Democrats have only 9, so we've got a lot more ground to defend. We also have a couple of offensive opportunities. So, one state doesn't determine the outcome of this election, but obviously we care about every state, and we care about helping see our incumbents succeed.
And if Republican Senate incumbents don't succeed, John Thune could lose his Senate majority. Most political analysts say that if there is a Democratic tsunami, Republicans will lose control of both the House and the Senate. At the moment, between high gas prices, the affordability crisis, and extreme public anger, a wave is building. Democrats have a huge opportunity, and Republicans are staring at the GOP's legislative power being wiped out. By the way, conservative media star Scott Jennings is now criticizing the Trump administration over this. Justice Department creates $1.8 billion fund to compensate Trump allies.
All of this makes me a little uncomfortable because it's a lot of money and it didn't go through the U.S. Congress. That's number one. Number two, I don't want to see a president necessarily handpicking people to get payments where he could be accused of just picking people out who are political allies.
Check out that video at the link below. It generated a lot of comments on YouTube. One of the most popular from Curtis, who wrote, "It's not a fund, it's blatant, naked theft." Indeed. I look forward to reading your comments about a Democratic tsunami building for the midterm elections as the GOP and Trump polling numbers keep crashing. I'm David Shuster. Thanks for joining us.